The room smells faintly of burnt plastic and hot dust, the scent of 1,000 machines all powering up, all failing all at once. On a bank of displays, an image that does not belong here flares into view. A red, leering skull. The words, "Hacked by GOP," stamped over a warning that reads like a ransom note yet feels like an ultimatum. Phones start buzzing. Desktops lock up and die in waves, not quietly, but with the stubborn clatter of operating systems forced to their knees. On the Santa Monica campus of a Hollywood studio, time fractures. The workday ends in a single synchronized seizure. You can hear it in the air. The keystrokes accelerate. The breathing shortens, the radios crackle. Help desk tickets stack into a vertical cliff. The network map, once a familiar constellation of subnets and production shares, is suddenly a battlefield where friendly territory is impossible to distinguish. Executives stare at dark screens. Contract crews can't pull scripts. Editors can't load footage. And someone whispers what everyone else is trying not to say. We are not just locked out. Something is destroying the estate. Inside the Security Operations Center, analysts triage with the instincts that only come from too many sleepless nights. Pull the plugs, isolate the floors, kill the VLAN trunks to the buildings with the most alarms. But the alarms are everywhere. It feels less like a break-in and more like a demolition. File servers that yesterday held film dailies, payroll documents, and pre-release cuts now throw errors that are as blunt as a brick. Missing files, corrupted volumes, code failures. The infection signature is neither subtle nor contained. It is maximal and theatrical, engineered to send a message. Word spreads faster than any official memo. Employees stream outside with laptops that have turned into glossy, expensive paperweights. Security guards ask IT what to tell people. IT has nothing yet to tell. Email is down. Badges still open doors for now. The company's name trends globally, not for a new blockbuster, but for something far more intimate and destabilizing. Its private digital life is being ripped open and broadcast to the world. In the coming days, torrents of exfiltrated data will pour into the wild. Private emails, unreleased films, salary spreadsheets, legal negotiations, risk registers. Each leak will land like a drumbeat, mocking the notion that a breach is a single point in time. The attackers will taunt, posture, and escalate, and the studio known for spectacle will find itself the stage for a spectacle of a different kind. And as the dust settles, an uncomfortable truth will crystallize. This wasn't an ordinary cybercrime. This was punishment. It was politics by other means. It was a warning scripted in binaries and delivered with theatrical flair, against a target built to understand theatrics. Tonight we go back into that room, into those days when the skull first appeared and the servers began to die, and we reconstruct what happened, how the attackers got in, how they moved, what they took, what they broke, and why it changed the way an entire industry thought about risk. This is the Sony Pictures breach. Not just a hack, but a crisis where geopolitics and gigabytes collided, where the line between creative expression and national retaliation blurred, and where the cost of cybersecurity moved from a budget line to an existential question. Sony Pictures Entertainment is a place built on the stewardship of narratives, scripts, cuts, contracts, schedules, and thousands of creative fragments stitched into films and shows that travel the world. Beneath the red carpets and press tours lies a brutally practical reality. A film studio is a logistics engine. Editorial bays must pull petabytes from networked storage. Production accountants need sensitive legal and financial docs at their fingertips. Marketing teams swap assets back and forth with agencies and regional partners. Vendors come and go with narrow windows of access. The default setting of a modern studio is connectivity. Connectivity isn't just convenience, it's competition. Studios that can assemble projects faster, share dailies securely across continents, and coordinate massive marketing pushes have an edge. That edge depends on identity systems, file shares, SSO portals, VPN concentrators, collaboration suites, digital asset management products, and specialized production tools. Each carries not only business value but potential blast radius. Over time, these systems accrete exceptions, shortcuts, and legacy dependencies, not because people don't care, but because the work never stops. Calendars don't make room for a big bang network refactor. Production insists on that aging plugin, because the editor they hired in Prague swears by it. And so, out of necessity, a studio becomes a city, messy, alive, and fragile in ways that are visible only when something breaks. In 2014, global conversations about cyber risk were evolving but still compartmentalized. Retail had endured payment card breaches. Tech companies battled industrial-scale credential stuffing. Oil and gas quietly contended with ICS intrusions and data theft. Entertainment had seen piracy and leaks, but largely as downstream incidents. A screener slipping out, a rough cut surfacing on a torrent site. The idea that a studio could be operationally kneecapped by a destructive cyber attack was not yet front of mind in Hollywood's risk models. The threat profiles executives worried about were lawsuits, production delays, box office misses, talent relations. The adversary set was unions, critics, competitors, the weather. The adversary set did not include a state-backed team, with the time and patience to internalize a company's network map like a director internalizes a script. Yet the seeds were there. Studios operate at the intersection of culture and politics. Films carry messages even unintentionally. Satire stings. Comedy slips past defenses. A movie can be outrageous and still matter, and sometimes precisely because it is outrageous. In that landscape, a campus of servers and workstations is not just a back office. It is an engine for cultural output that some actors may find intolerable. The breach matters because it redefined what a cyber attack could try to accomplish against a media company. The attackers didn't just steal. They sought to coerce behavior in the physical world, to stop a film, to chill speech, to impose consequences. It also matters because it spotlighted a class of malware, designed not for quiet reconnaissance but for noisy destruction. Where opportunistic ransomware encrypts for money, wiper malware erases for impact. It burns negotiation bridges. It says, we want you to hurt more than we want you to pay. Finally, the breach matters because it forced the industry to confront the contradiction at its core. The need to be open enough to support a constant flow of collaboration, yet closed enough to shoulder the weight of secrets. Creative industries trade on trust. Agents email unvarnished takes. Producers share budget realities. Lawyers draft language that will only ever see the light of day if something goes wrong. That private candor is essential to the making of public art. But once that candor becomes public, it mutates into a spectacle of its own, one that can damage careers, derail deals, and poison working relationships. For Sony Pictures, the breach wasn't just data loss. It was a forced publicization of the private gears that make stories go. Months before the skull graphic appeared on desktops, the attackers are already at work. This is the part of the story that, in real time, no one inside the victim organization gets to watch. Phishing lures land. A contractor's credentials get reused from a site that later dumps its user database. A remote access system accepts a password that should have been rotated. A legitimate account logs in from an implausible location and blends into the daily fog of authentication events. The attackers probe, pause, and probe again, learning the cadence of the network like an actor learning the cadence of a monologue. They find the domain controllers, or at least find who has access to them. They harvest hashes from endpoints that belong to administrators, help desk, system engineers, application owners. They enumerate shares, discovery tools, and software deployment systems, taking note of anything that can push commands at scale. They move slowly with a sense of rehearsal. The goal is not to ring the alarm. The goal is to convert access into authority, and authority into inevitability. As autumn unfolds, a different tempo emerges. The attackers stage tools and test scripts in quiet corners of the estate. Directories rarely visited, systems that hum along without interactive logons. They prepare the elements of their destructive payload, customizing binaries for the environment, signing code where it helps, spoofing names and paths that blend with known processes. The network is busy with holiday releases and Q4 crunch. The attackers count on that busyness to cover their prelude. Then it is November 24th, 2014. Sometime in the early morning, machines across Sony Pictures begin to display a takeover message that is part ransom, part manifesto. The Guardians of Peace claim credit, accuse the company of wrongdoing, and threaten further harm. At nearly the same time, destructive executables commence their work, like fuses lit across a warehouse. They overwrite master boot records, wipe files, scramble metadata, and in certain cases replace content with strings designed to be noticed. Systems reboot into oblivion. Desktops freeze at startup. Servers throw disk errors that set off a long, futile parade of recoveries. By mid-morning, IT leadership makes the only call left: disconnect to survive. Uplinks are severed. External connectivity is shut down. Routers are reconfigured to isolate subnets. Footsteps echo in hallways as teams literally pull power cables. in data closets because there is no time to map a perfect order of operations. The paradox of the day is that the company has to disable its own nervous system to prevent the contagion from reaching the last healthy organs. The first leaks arrive within days. Compressed archives, built from the studio's own content, appear through file-sharing sites and link aggregators beyond the company's control. And unreleased film surfaces. Then another. Then folders of HR records, spreadsheets of salaries, and email caches from senior executives. Each new release triggers a secondary crisis. Who is impacted? What is the legal exposure? How do we respond? What do we tell employees? What do we tell partners? What do we tell the world? Externally, the attack lands in a stunned news cycle. It is not yet routine to see a corporation so publicly dismembered in data. The headlines escalate as the leaks reveal sensitive commentary, celebrity negotiations, and blunt assessments that were never meant to leave private threads. The narrative acquires a cultural freight far beyond the specifics of a security incident. The studio is not just compromised, it is humiliated, and that humiliation becomes a commodity in its own right. As the narrative accelerates, attention gravitates to a particular film on the studio's slate, a satirical story centered on the assassination of a sitting head of state. Threats are issued that, while technologically nebulous, are psychologically effective. Theater chains reconsider their plans. Under pressure, the initial wide release is pulled and later a smaller release is arranged. A choice about a comedy becomes a symbol about speech, safety, and coercion. The studio is not only incident response, it is crisis communications, corporate governance, and geopolitical proxy. In December, public attribution arrives from U.S. authorities, protesting that the scale, tooling, and objectives match an actor long suspected of disruptive campaigns. The policy world begins to move. Sanctions will follow. Statements will be made from podiums far removed from server rooms. The breach becomes not only a corporate disaster, but a node in international relations, where the response to destructive cyber operations is debated on the record. Behind the scenes, restoration is long and punishing. It is not as simple as re-imaging machines and resetting passwords. Systems have to be rebuilt with an eye toward preventing replay. The company has to provision hardware at speed. Data from backups must be validated and staged. Anything that touched the contamination gets treated like a biohazard. For weeks, then months, the work continues, often unnoticed by the public that has moved on to newer headlines. But inside, the breach remains an ongoing condition, a gravity well that warps every plan. The attack chain follows a now familiar choreography, but at the time it carried a shocking boldness. Initial access likely began with stolen or phished credentials. In a sprawling enterprise, it only takes a single high-privilege account to open doors that are meant to be guarded by layers. The intruders use that foothold to enumerate Windows domains, a technique powered by built-in commands like net and wmic as much as by specialized tools. They learned who the domain admins were, which service accounts ran which processes, which management servers had authority over fleets of endpoints. Credential theft was the cornerstone. Mimikatz or comparable tools extracted hashes and plaintext passwords from memory. Past the hash and past the ticket blended with legitimate administrative activity. Remote execution moved through channels like PSExec and Windows management instrumentation. In this phase, the malware is not spectacular. It is pragmatic. It hides in the ordinary, which is the oldest trick in the book and also the most effective. Persistence and staging came next. The attackers established backdoors that could survive reboots and maintained command and control channels that leveraged allowed outbound traffic. They did not need to beacon loudly. They already had the keys. What they needed was endurance and reach. They planted their destructive components quietly, ensuring they existed on a critical mass of systems so that when the curtain lifted, the effect would be symmetrical and swift. The destructive component, the wiper, is architected for finality. It's not designed to coerce payment. It's designed to break. At a low level, a wiper can clobber the master boot record so a machine cannot start, overwrite file contents with junk, or destroy the file system structures that tell the operating system where anything lives. Some variants deliberately display taunting strings in overwritten sectors. Others are silent, letting the absence of data speak for itself. In this case, the wiper acted with both subtlety and spectacle. Practical routines to ensure irrecoverability, paired with a theatrical payload that would get screens to broadcast the message. The attackers use the victim's own software deployment infrastructure against it. When a company can legitimately push updates to tens of thousands of endpoints, that power is a dream for an adversary. The same pipeline that distributes patches can distribute poison if controlled by the wrong hands. The malware did not need to reinvent remote code execution. It appropriated the enterprise's existing muscle. That appropriation is a hallmark of mature attackers. Prefer the victim's tools to your own, because they're trusted and they blend. Exfiltration preceded destruction. Before the lights went out, data flowed out, packaged, compressed, and moved along channels that in the moment looked like heavy but plausible traffic. A common pattern is to stage archives on internal systems and then move them in chunks to external drop points. The size and diversity of the leak suggest a campaign that prioritized human-readable, high-impact content, emails, salary sheets, film cuts, contracts. Data theft is not indiscriminate. It is curated. The curation speaks to intent. Attribution often becomes a noisy public debate, but from a purely technical perspective, the indicators align with a group comfortable mixing custom code with off-the-shelf utilities, comfortable living off the land, and comfortable turning a corporate network into a weapon against itself. Command and control infrastructure tended to be ephemeral, designed for specific stages of the operation and then abandoned. Time zones and compilation artifacts added clues but were never decisive on their own. What was decisive was the combination of objectives, tooling, and operational cadence. On the defensive side, the drama of the skull graphic can obscure how difficult it is to stop a wiper once it starts. EDR tools can detect suspicious behaviors, but when the blast radius is vast and the detonations are nearly simultaneous, the response window shrinks to seconds. Your best defense is not detective, it is architectural. Segment the network so a single push cannot touch everything. Limit privileges so a hijacked service account cannot deploy at scale. Invest in egress monitoring so exfiltration stands out. Keep offline, immutable backups so what is destroyed can be rebuilt. None of these are glamorous. All of them are necessary. The attackers exploited the understory of exceptions. Shared local admin credentials reused for convenience. Aging systems that could not be patched without breaking critical workflows. Jump boxes that slowly accreted access because no one wanted to break someone's job. They understood that in an enterprise, policy and reality are often different species. Policy says no. Reality says we'll fix it after this release. After this deadline, after award season, the adversary waits out those afters and moves through the cracks they leave behind. Operationally, the company's digital nervous system suffered a traumatic injury. Email, authentication, file services, and workflow tools were disrupted. Crews reliant on those systems were forced to improvise analog fallbacks. Paper, in-person sign-offs, hastily stood-up phones, and personal email accounts, all of which carry their own risks. In a studio timeline, weeks of downtime compress into millions of dollars. Contracts have kill dates. Talent has availability windows. Marketing has media buys locked months in advance. Each day a system stays down radiates cost into departments far beyond IT. Financially, the ledger tallied direct incident response spending, hardware, software, forensic services, legal support, crisis communications, and indirect losses from delays, lost productivity, and derailed releases. Insurance policies were tested in ways underwriters had not fully modeled for destructive, politically motivated events. Shareholders asked for clarity that, in the fog of response, is hard to provide. The company's leadership had to narrate a moving target to regulators and investors while the engineering realities shifted under their feet. Culturally, the breach detonated a secondary bomb in the form of leaked correspondence. Private emails took on a public life and were mined for outrage. Sarcasm and heat-of-the-moment candor, which in any workplace are understood as part of internal debate, were decontextualized and pushed into an ecosystem that thrives on maximum virality. Relationships strained. Apologies were issued. The chilling effect went beyond the studio. Across the industry, professionals rewired their sense of email as a space for frankness. People began self-editing with an eye toward imagined future leaks, which is a loss even if it is a rational adaptation. Legally, the exposure of personal information for thousands of employees, past and present, triggered notification obligations, credit monitoring offers, class action suits, and a long tail of administrative work. The harm here is not abstract. An employee who trusted their employer to guard their social security. Number now watches their credit reports and wonders if a loan denial next year ties back to this crash. Security professionals feel this in their bones. The user is not a generic entity but an actual person with a mortgage and a family. The breach made that gut knowledge visible at scale. Reputationally, the brand weathered storm systems it had no script for. Headlines were unforgiving. Opinion pieces treated internal memos as public artifacts. The studio's decisions about a single film became a referendum on courage and caution, safety and speech, all under the glare of incomplete information and immediate consequence. It is one thing to debate these subjects in a seminar. It is another to shoulder them when threats land on chief security officers' desks, and theater chains make real-time calls about their employees and welfare. In the policy arena, the incident became a defining case for how governments conceptualize and respond to destructive cyber activity against private entities. The usual law enforcement pathway, investigate, build a case, prosecute, was ill-suited for an adversary with no extradition and no incentive to cooperate. Sanctions became a tool of choice, signal and consequence bundled together. The gap between kinetic threats and digital ones narrowed in public imagination, and the phrase cyber deterrence entered wider circulation, even as experts debated what practically deterrence meant. Within Hollywood, the incident acted as a forcing function. Studios revisited network segmentation, identity governance, vendor access management, and disaster recovery. Cybersecurity budgets, once a defensive argument, found new champions at the top table. Boardrooms asked questions not just about whether backups existed, but whether those backups were offline, immutable, and recoverable under duress. The event also reshaped contract language with vendors and talent, introducing clauses about data handling, notification timelines, and breach remedies that, before 2014, would have seemed overly cautious. For employees, there was grief, anger, and fatigue. Imagine walking into work and finding that your tools, your calendar, your files, your colleagues' contact information, everything is inaccessible. Imagine learning that your personal data, entrusted to HR, is now part of a public archive. Incident response narratives often focus on the technical heroism and the executive decision-making. But the human reality is that thousands of people had their professional routines, and in important ways, their sense of safety violently altered. That is a wound that lingers. The Sony Pictures breach previewed a world in which destructive capability and narrative manipulation converge. Since then, multiple industries have faced wipers disguised as ransomware, supply chain compromises that transform trusted updates into Trojan horses, and extortion as public relations where leaks are choreographed to maximize shame or leverage. The entertainment sector remains an attractive target because it manufactures cultural artifacts that matter to people outside the balance sheet. That magnetism means studios must plan not only for theft but for coercion, pressure campaigns that aim to shape behavior, cancel projects, or punish messages. Defensively, the lesson is less about a single vendor or product and more about posture. Identity is the new perimeter, but identity cannot stand alone. Least privilege must be a lived reality, not a poster on a wall. Service accounts should be rotated and constrained. Lateral movement must be treated like a fire you expect every red team to try to start. Microsegmentation, just-in-time access, credential hygiene, and logged alertable administrative actions. EDR monitoring should be paired with out-of-band response channels because, when the mail server is down, you discover which of your playbooks assume email exists. The hardest work is architectural and cultural. Architectural, because segmentation is not a switch but an ongoing negotiation between productivity and safety, especially in environments where terabytes of media move daily. Cultural, because the organization must close the gap between policy and practice without turning security into an antagonist. Creative professionals cannot be told merely to do less. They must be offered secure equivalents that respect their timelines and tools. Security teams that embed, observe, and iterate earn the trust needed to pull the plug when it matters. From a geopolitical perspective, the breach underscores that nation-state actors will sometimes treat private companies as proxies in disputes that are nominally between governments. That reality forces a rethink of public-private coordination. If the harm is political, the response may need political instruments alongside technical recovery, clearer thresholds for government support, faster channels for sharing indicators, and more consistent frameworks for attribution and consequence. All of these are needed to prevent the normalization of coercive cyber operations against cultural producers. There is also a narrative hygiene lesson. Organizations must assume that some portion of their private communications will one day be public. That does not mean abandoning candor. Candor is the fuel of decision-making. But it does argue for discipline, for written channels that separate heat from policy, and for finance and HR-grade protections around the most sensitive exchanges. If email is the bloodstream, then sensitive debates need organs with thicker walls. Collaboration suites should not be vaults by default. Finally, resilience thinking must move from restore from backups to continue the mission under fire. In many incidents now, attackers time destruction and leaks to coincide with business milestones. The next generation of playbooks cannot assume a clean stop and restart. They must include modes of degraded operation, communications that function without core systems, and pre-negotiated vendor support that does not rely on the very identities under attack. Tabletop exercises should not end when the skull appears. They should run for weeks, modeling the drumbeat of leaks and the relentless pressure of external narratives. Walk back into that room where the skull first appeared and the servers began to fall silent. Freeze the frame and look closely. You see analysts doing triage with hands that are steady despite the adrenaline. You see leaders making decisions with information that changes by the minute. You see employees staring at blank screens that yesterday were their livelihoods. A breach is not an abstract headline. It is a story of people, competence, and limits. It's a story of systems designed by humans under constraints, and other humans weaponizing those constraints. The Sony Pictures breach does not reduce to a single lesson. It is a braid of lessons. Be humble about how much you don't know about your own environment. Be ruthless about reducing the privileges that make at-scale destruction possible. Be generous with the humans whose data you hold. Design with their worst day in mind, and be honest about the world you operate in. If your work has cultural weight, then your networks and your people may be asked to carry risks that seem out of proportion to your revenue. That's not fair, but it is real. The most important work you can do happens before the next skull appears. Inventory your crown jewels and the dependencies that feed them. Red team the path to mass software deployment and close the doors you find. Confirm that your backups are not only present but truly restorable and isolated from the systems they protect. Practice communicating when your primary channels vanish. And build relationships with your peers, with law enforcement, with vendors that can be activated at speed, because in a true crisis you will move at the speed of your slowest trust. Sony Pictures survived. The films kept coming. Careers mended. New controls were built. New habits formed. The headlines moved on. But under the surface, the breach changed the gravitational field. It made it harder to pretend that cyber risk was an IT problem, or that free expression could be separated from the infrastructure that carries it. It made clear that resilience is cultural as much as technical, and it left a message that every studio, every creative shop, every company with something the world cares about should take to heart. You cannot outsource courage, but you can engineer for it. So here's the call to action. If you're a leader, make cybersecurity a strategic function that reports into reality, not wishful thinking. If you're on the front lines, keep pushing for the boring, unglamorous fixes that put steel in the spine of a network. If you're a vendor, build for failure modes, not just happy paths. If you're a policymaker, align your levers so that coercive cyber attacks against private entities meet coordinated responses. And if you're any of the above, remember the faces in that room on that day in late November. The next breach will be different, but the next breach will also be the same. Prepare as if the skull is already on its way.